Welcome back to r/neighbors from hell, where people share stories about their crazy neighbors, and if you are new to my channel, please don't forget to subscribe to join our amazing community, and without any further ado, let's dive right into the stories. The first one is titled, Neighbor Throws Out My Classic $525,000 Car When I'm Not Home. My next door neighbor is a woman that is your typical Karen. The only difference is that this lady is awful to every single person in the neighborhood except for me. I have no idea why, but this lady is so nice and pleasant to me, even though I know she is nasty to anybody else. Again, I had no idea why, but I was not going to look a gift horse in the mouth and decided to just go with it. Having a nice neighbor came with a lot of perks, and one of them was somebody willing to pet sit for me. I had a job that unfortunately caused me to need to travel about once a month. I've got 3 cats and a dog, and putting them all up in boarding every time I had to leave was going to cost a fortune. Karen, though, talked about loving animals, and soon she became my go-to pet sitter. I always made sure to pay her well because I know that taking care of 4 animals is not easy. It still came out cheaper than sending them to a boarder, and this way I knew they would not be stuck in cages. I also saw my pets with her and they seemed to all like her. Things were going really smoothly with the entire arrangement. Of course, I would not be writing this story unless something horrible happened, and let me take a moment to tell you about my car. I have 2 cars actually, one of which is a normal modern car that I use to go to work and when the trips are local enough take with me when I leave. The second car is a 1969 Pontiac GTO Judge Convertible. For those that have no idea what that means, it's a very old rare muscle car that is worth roughly $500,000. I've been working on it and trying to get it in working condition in my spare time. To the point that it takes up the entire 2-car garage because of parts, and my everyday car stays outside in my driveway. These stories seem unrelated, but this is where the 2 of them collide. My extra pet supplies are kept in the garage, and I give Karen a remote key for it when I leave so she can get the food. I was never worried about the car because she did not seem to understand cars, and there is actually another locked gate I installed inside of my garage to keep the car safe. When you have the 3 cats and go on a trip for a couple of weeks, you know that they are going to use a ton of litter, so I need to store it somewhere. Some of you might be already calling me an idiot for giving anybody the key to the garage, and I will give you that one because I feel like one. I got home from one trip and went to meet up with Karen to pay her and collect my pets. My dog was jumping all over me, and my cats as usual rubbed against my leg and then pretended I did not exist. Got to love the difference in the way animals act. So I took them all home and everything seemed normal until I had to go to the garage to get more cat litter and fill the box up again. When I got to my garage, it was locked as usual, but when I went inside, I could see that the gate holding the car was smashed open and the car had vanished. All the parts I had lying around for it too were gone, and I started to have a panic attack thinking about what could have happened to it. I'm not kidding about that, I was on the garage floor for about 30 minutes before I calmed down enough to go into the house. I do have security cameras and I went through them on a high speed and stopping when I noticed something. I saw Karen going into my garage like she was going to get food or litter, but ended up walking out without getting anything. This happened 2 more times until the last time she came with 2 men. They started filling the back of their truck with the parts and handing Karen cash for them before driving off. Then the next day she opened the garage again with another guy standing there who walked into the garage with a sledgehammer that I guess was the gate-smashing culprit. Then I saw my car being towed up into one of those car transports you can hitch onto a truck. And that was it. That was the last glimpse of my car. I was so angry and I went right to Karen and started knocking on the door until she answered. I am sure she could tell by my face that I figured out what happened because I could not get a word out before she started cutting me off. She was rambling on for about 10 minutes, mostly repeating herself, so I will just give you part of the conversation that we had. Karen Don't look at me like that, come on. That thing was a piece of junk and it was always just sitting there in your garage doing nothing. I had been looking it up and you were sitting on so much money with that car and paying me almost nothing to watch your pets. Me? That was still my car. And no, it really wasn't, because I deserve the money from it for all the things I do for you. I could have sued you for that money, but instead I sold something that you were not going to ever use instead. Besides, now you have plenty of room for your other car in there, so you should really be thanking me. And that was when I finally lost it. You want me to thank you? That was one of the rarest cars and you sold it without any kind of ownership. Not to mention thousands of dollars worth of parts. I want you to call those guys up right now and get me everything back. Karen, I'm not going to do that. In fact, I'm pretty sure it's illegal for you to be spying on me like that. She was trying to turn it around like me having a camera on my own property meant I was spying on her. However, I took her ass to court as well as called the police on the grounds of grand theft auto. They managed to get the guy's license plate number and track down my car. Luckily, it was still in good condition and he had not done anything to it. She told him that she was my mother and the owner of the car and I was just storing it for her. As for the parts, they could not be recovered, but since I had proof of purchase for all of them and it was clear on video she was the one selling them, she was forced to pay me back for everything. She tried to say that I was in the wrong for spying on her, but the court shut her down right away. She was also arrested and had to get bailed out of jail by her friends because she committed grand theft auto and fraud by claiming to be the deed holder. She somehow talked her way out of going to jail and instead got a plea deal of probation and a restraining order to stay the hell away from me. Next time I'm just going to pay to board my pets and make sure I have cameras watching every part of my house when I am gone. And yeah, Ripe Stars, you know, that story kind of reminds me of my girlfriend and I, because recently we went on a little 4-day vacation and we paid the cleaning lady from the next house over to basically take care of Disney during those days, and we gave her the house key so she can come in, check if everything is okay with the house and then play with Disney. And you know, even though we can lock our doors individually, it still felt weird to give someone that we don't really know that well the keys to our house. However, fortunately, it all went well and she seems to be a trustworthy person, and also she took very good care of our cat. The next one is titled, Neighbor Tried to Screw Me Over. My wife and I purchased our house a few years ago, and the day we moved in, our neighbor, Roger, called the cops on us for moving in too loudly. We were not playing music or even talking amongst ourselves, just my wife and I moving our belongings into our new house. And yeah, Ripe Stars, that's what you call a friendly welcome. Anyway, the cops came and I explained that I was just moving in and they apologized for bothering us. Roger, in all of his retired glory, comes out of his house immediately after they left to let us know he is the one that called the cops, and in more words says he is setting the tone for our new life. Even still, we were super cordial with this guy because we wanted to make a good impression on our new neighborhood. It's our first home and it was important to us to make it homey. About a year or so later, our first son is born. We let our property fall to the back burner while we adjusted to parenthood, and a few newspapers pile up in our driveway and in the rain sort of melt onto our driveway, all on our property. So then Roger comes knocking on our door to complain. I tell him I'm sorry and we'd let it get away from us. I explained that we have a newborn son and I would get to it ASAP. He digs in and starts telling me how when he was a new father, he did not let anything affect his property, and he tells me I am being lazy. I said, then why don't you pick it up if you're so worried about it? To which he says, no, I want you to pick up the damn mess. I was trying to be semi-cordial still because I'm not interested in unnecessary conflict with my neighbor, so I told him, fine, I will get to it, and he left. Later that year, Roger comes over one day to ask if he can trim the tree that hangs over my fence onto his side of the fence, and I am fine with that, so I say no problem, and he casually mentions how one time when a 17-year-old kid, friends with his delinquent drug addict son at the time, broke into his garage, he hit him in the head with a baseball bat until he was really hurt, and the police came and he was cleared of all responsibility because it was a break-in. He is smiling and laughing while telling me this. Noted, I'm thinking to myself, this guy is a psychopath. Well, it is a couple years later now with a few more minor run-ins, but nothing too significant, and my wife and I just had our second son 1 month ago. About 10 days ago, my son is not even 3 weeks old at this time, I get a notice on my door saying my lawn is in violation of my city's code. I mowed it 2 days before my son was born, so it's been about 3 weeks since I mowed and it's been raining since. I have 48 hours to comply. I call the number on the card and no answer, so I call the non-emergency line to verify what my responsibility is because of the vague wording on the door hanger. It is because one of the types of grass in my lawn, growing very sparsely like 1 blade per square inch, is over 12 inches tall. The majority of the grass was like 2 to 3 inches long, but there was another type there as well that grew faster. I told them that I'm a new father and asked for an extension to deal with it later. They said they don't even worry about the lawn, just take care of the baby, so now with some newfound confidence I mow my lawn in a spiral shape, leaving lots of grass remaining as a middle finger to whoever, we know who it was at this point in the story, right, called the cops on me about my lawn. A couple days later, Roger talks to me over our shared backyard fence and asks about my lawnmower and if it is busted or something. I told him, no, I just have more important priorities than mowing my lawn, and tell him about my new son, and I then asked if he was the one that called the cops on me about it. He says he called code enforcement, but not on me. He called them on my new neighbors on my other side, a real nice Mexican family who is always diligent about their lawn and always working outside on their new property. He says code enforcement must have happened to notice my lawn when they went to follow up on his call next door. At this point I say something along the lines of, hey look, I'm a pretty cool guy. If you have a concern about my property, then you can speak with me directly. He swears up and down that he did not call them on me and that it was just a coincidence. Whatever. About a week after that, yesterday, he knocks on my door and I already know what's coming. I answer the door kind of chuckling and greet him. He is kind of chuckling too at this point because it is just ridiculous. He says, hey, so you said I could talk with you if I had an issue with your property. I tell him, yeah, by all means. He gestures to my lawn and asks what it is about. I say, it's kind of like a middle finger to whoever called code enforcement on me. He is irate and says, if it is a middle finger to him, I stop him and remind him that he told me he did not call them on me, so he should not feel targeted. He ignores me again and restarts his sentence the same way again, so I cut him off again and I say, I specifically am telling you, it's not a middle finger to you, Roger. He says, if it is a middle finger to me, then this means war. Over what? I asked him, laughing. He is getting bigger and huffier by the second and tells me that I'm a lazy piece of work and my property is in shambles and that all the other neighbors mow their lawn. I remind him that I have a newborn son and that my lawn can wait. He puffs up as big as he can and says, I've never had this issue when I was a new father. I told him I don't give a damn about what he did as a dad. Ironically enough, his drug addict son lives in the house on the other side of him and causes trouble in the neighborhood regularly. Cars peeling out, people screaming at each other, drug addicts always waiting outside, etc. And now he tells me that he is going to call code enforcement on me every day and I tell him to get the F off my property. He says, move me. So I tell him I'm calling the cops and he says do it, so I grab my phone and start dialing. He walks to the sidewalk and keeps yelling at me about how I am lazy and not fit to own my property. The cops come and speak with us. Very anticlimactic, they did make sure to let him know that he needs to get off my property when I say so, and that is all I wanted from them. Tomorrow, I'm going to take my hedge trimmers and mow my maze down to 11 inches. F you, Roger. And yeah, ripe stars, I simply cannot understand how anybody can be so concerned with other people's lawns. I mean, alright, if it is like a jungle over there, then maybe, but if it is just a few inches, who cares? How can you have so little to do in your life and so much free time that you should care about something like this? Either these people are really bored because they have too much money or too much time or whatever, or they are just crazy. The next one was posted by user Infinite Emotions on r/ripe stories, and it is titled The Tangled Threads of a Small Town. I'm really not sure how to flare this. It's small town drama, a-hole tags and entitled people. There are 3 people important to this story, one of the best teachers ever who I will call Mrs. Crane, a hardworking classmate just trying to do her best who I will call Rachel, and a man who was a total and complete a-hole that I will call D. This takes place in the early 2000s when DVDs were just etching out VHS tapes and the internet was a baby. Now gather around the glowing screens, my fellow Ripe Stars, and let me share this with you. The town I was in for my high school was part of a rural area. Kids came to my high school from several towns that were only called cities so that the people in charge could charge city-style taxes from everyone in the city limits. In reality, they were more like villages. The high school was also in a small town, but it was bigger than the others, actually had a hospital and a college, and is used as the county hub. D had a brilliant, and it was brilliant, I will admit, idea. He decided to put in a video store, yes, those used to be a thing, in the county hub. This was brilliant because up until this point, people wanting to go to a video store, the 2 big chains at the time were Blockbuster and Movie Gallery, had to either go to a large city across the river or to the capital city. So, even though the prices were more expensive than a big box video store, it was way more convenient. Especially since the store he opened was right next to the grocery store, which was the biggest store in the area. He also, important later, hired high school kids. This was also brilliant as it gave the high schoolers work experience since there were not a lot of employment possibilities in a small town, and made the parents of said high schoolers happy since they also wanted their children to have job experience that did not involve farm work, and it meant that he could get away with technically paying them minimum wage and no one batted an eye. Back at the high school, Miss Crane was starting a drama club and trying to start a drama department in the school, which she eventually succeeded at because Miss Crane was an awesome human being. She did what no one thought was possible. She got our school, our rural middle-of-nowhere school, into the state drama competition. Of course, she did this before she actually had students for her drama club, but she did not let that stop her. As soon as she had the play, she held auditions and Rachel passed. Rachel was also working at the video store and Dee told her she could not do both. I was there for Miss Crane's side of the phone call, and here is, to the best of my recollection, what Miss Crane said. Miss Crane, I understand that working at your store is expanding her job probabilities. However, she is also a high school student and I know you're going to let her have the full high school experience. I know that because you're the owner of a small business dependent on the goodwill of a small gossipy town and you don't want to be on the wrong side of the rumor mill. That was not a question, Miss D. Miss Crane had dealt with far more difficult people than D, read anyone in charge of funding distribution at the school, and the play commenced. Miss Crane and D butt heads once again when it came to the competition. See, the competition was held in the state capital city on a Saturday, and out of deference to Rachel's job, all of the rehearsals had been held during the week. D did not want to have a Saturday rush without Rachel there to work. Now, that was not a conversation I personally overheard between Miss Crane and D, but from the rumor mill the general gist went like this. Miss Crane, I thought we went through this already. D, you don't come here and threaten my business. Miss Crane, that was not a threat, that was a forecast. The end result, Rachel came with the rest of the group to perform the play in front of the judges. The way this was set up was that during the day, the different schools would give their assigned plays to the judges and the winner would do an extra play for the judges and audiences after the results were announced. D said that given the chances of us winning were so small, statewide competition against schools with established drama departments, right after the play Rachel had to book it back to the store for her shift. Miss Crane said that if we won, and everyone knew how unlikely it was for us to win, he had to let Rachel off to come back to the center and perform the final play. And D agreed. We won. D did not want to let Rachel leave though. Miss Crane yelled at him, and the final performance was about half an hour later than it should have been, because it took time to both convince D to let Rachel go and for Rachel to actually drive to the center. Great night, we all had fun. Next day, Rachel goes in for her Sunday shift only to have Dee screaming at her into tears for abandoning your post. Here's the thing about living in a small town, there is no such thing as a private conversation in a public place. Rachel's fellow co-worker Kay, love you girl, never change, overheard Dee yelling at Rachel. By this point, the whole town and all the surrounding ones knew that we had won the competition, so Kay was horrified by Dee's response. She told everyone what Dee said to Rachel. The business dried up. Rachel was the star of the hour and Dee had treated her like crap, so after returning their movies, people decided it was better to use the gas to go to one of the bigger cities than to support Dee's business. Parents who had previously been okay with their children working there got their children to quit so that Dee had no employees. And remember, he did not employ adults. Things got so bad that the grocery store put a poster board sign up in the window reminding folks that they were not affiliated with Dee's business right next to a sign congratulating Rachel on being the star of the show, which she was. Dee's business was unsustainable. However, that's only part of the issue. See, people were so upset by Dee making Rachel cry that they did not just stop shopping at his store, no, they stopped selling to him. He could not buy things from the grocery store anymore, he could not eat at the one restaurant, the convenience store would not sell him snacks or gas, and the guy who ran a repair shop out of his barn refused to work on his car. You get the picture, he tried to sell the business. No one bought it. Anyone from out of town looking for his business to see if they wanted to purchase it was heralded with stories of infestation, given a story of how the building had been poorly built and was falling down, or given the wrong directions entirely. Streets in the area had confusing names such as Bleecker versus Bleecker streets, and streets that changed their names every generation, and so on. The town, which tended to buy buildings to preserve architecture, did not buy it, so Dee went to the bank. Let me give a little advice about banking in a small town. Just don't. Seriously, make that trek, waste that gas, don't bank at the branch in your small town. I don't care that there are laws that say the workers cannot share financial information, those laws are unenforceable in a small town. Dee did not get this advice, and this was not a national bank that only had a branch in the area. No, this was a local bank run by local people, all of whom had heard about what happened with Rachel. So, when the business failed and he tried to get advice on how to foreclose the property, they refused to foreclose. They dropped the payments to what on paper sounded reasonable, but were actually bleeding the man dry financially. Dee tried to declare bankruptcy, I don't know why, but he couldn't. The inevitable happened and Dee's lease was not renewed. He tried to move into the store only to be told by the local police department that he could not do that. He tried to find a place in one of the nearby towns, but the one he had chosen was the county hub. Eventually, he left. There really was no other option for him, and he still had to pay the mortgage for the building, and he still had to pay city and state property taxes on the building, and the building is still standing vacant today because no one will do business with the man. And yeah, ripe stars, that is what I would call small town justice, so to say, and it seems like it really does not pay off to be a douchebag in, what I assume, judging by the story, an American small town. And by the way guys, I'm curious, how many of you do live in these kinds of small towns? Have you ever witnessed this kind of small town justice? If so, please feel free to share your own story on r/ripe stories on Reddit. And there will be a good chance that I might read your story in a future video. Alternatively though, you can just head to my About page on YouTube, best done via your PC, and click on my business email and send me the story via email if that is what you prefer. And ripe stars, with this we have reached the end of the video. However, if you still cannot get enough of my content, then I would highly suggest to check out my endless binge watch playlist, which will soon show up in the left corner of the screen. In addition, I would really appreciate it if you could not only subscribe to the channel, but also turn on the bell notifications, which you can do by clicking on the little bell icon right next to the subscribe button. This will help my channel tremendously, and this will make sure that you don't miss any of my videos. Furthermore, if you want to see additional ripe content that I don't post on YouTube, then I would suggest to head on over to patreon.com/ripeyoutube for more than 50 50 exclusive videos that you will not see anywhere else. Thank you so much for your amazing daily support, and I hope to see you again tomorrow.